Step back tens of thousands of years into the long, slow rhythm of prehistoric life, where the hum of daily tasks replaced the tick of a clock. In this gentle journey, we imagine the world of Paleolithic women, the first stirrings of the day. In a Paleolithic settlement did not begin with the abrupt chiming of a bell or the blare of an alarm clock, but with the slow, natural unfolding of light across the landscape. You might imagine a broad plain, or perhaps the gentle shelter of a forest clearing, where a cluster of low shelters rests in a loose ring. These shelters are not houses as you know them. No neat walls, no nailed beams. They are arrangements of mammoth hides stretched taut over bone frames, or perhaps more modest lean-tos of branches and thatch, depending on the season and region. The shapes are irregular, patched with repairs from seasons past, smelling faintly of smoke and hide. Here, the first to wake might be one of the older women, whose sleep is light and whose bones, though strong, no longer drive her to long journeys. For food, her eyes open before the full sun appears, trained by decades to read the subtle gradations between night's blue shadow and the thin gold of daybreak. She shifts under a fur blanket, sits up slowly, and feels for the embers of the hearth. Fire is a constant companion, one that must be fed gently, kept alive without interruption. She leans close, breathes softly on the coals, and adds a twist of dry grass before a stick of pine or birch bark. There is no rush. The fire will take in its own time, responding to her patient breath. Nearby, the soft huffs of sleepers mix with the rustle of hides. A baby stirs and fusses, and its mother eyes, still heavy with sleep, pulls the child close. The older woman, still tending the small flame, glances their way, the motion so habitual she hardly registers it. The baby's whimpers fade into the rhythmic comfort of feeding, and the mother's hand rests on the child's head, thumb absently tracing small circles in the fine hair. As the hearth comes alive, the faint scent of warming wood mingles with the smell of earth. The woman reaches for a pouch, stitched from animal stomach lining, that contains dried seeds and bits of tuber from the day before. She does not eat yet. This early stirring is more about coaxing the camp into life than satisfying her own hunger. She knows that, as the rest of the group wakes, someone will take up the work she's begun. Gradually, the camp stirs. A younger woman steps outside her shelter, hair mussed from sleep, rubbing her eyes. She stretches, the movement slow, deliberate, the kind of stretch that comes from sleeping on the firm earth. Her gaze sweeps the clearing, noting the faint footprints left in the mud by a fox or badger during the night. Such things are observed almost without thought, a quiet awareness built into daily habit. She pads over to the fire, crouches beside the older woman, and without exchanging words, takes up a flat stone and begins grinding a handful of seeds against it. The gritty rasp carries softly through the cool air. The grinding is not hurried. It is the kind of work that matches the rhythm of breathing. Each push of the stone releases a faint, earthy aroma, and the dust collects in a shallow depression. The two women work side by side, one feeding the fire, one breaking down seeds, while the rest of the camp slowly emerges. From the edge of the camp comes the sound of water being poured from a skin bag into a shallow pit lined with stones. Another woman is preparing to soften roots collected yesterday, soaking them so they can be pounded later. Behind her, a man emerges from the trees, a short spear in hand, not from hunting, but from checking the perimeter for signs of larger animals. His steps are unhurried. This is simply one of the morning duties, part of the unspoken cycle that has repeated for as long as he can remember. Soon, voices rise low, conversational tones, sometimes punctuated by laughter, when a child stumbles sleepily into view. The older children, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, begin their own small tasks, fetching water from a nearby stream, gathering dry sticks for the hearth. Their legs and arms are quick, but the work is not rushed. There is no clock to chase, no appointment to meet. The pace is dictated by what the day requires, and by the energy each person brings to it. By now, the fire burns steadily, and the smell of roasting tubers drifts across the clearing. A few women work with stone tools, reshaping the edges of flint blades that have dulled from use. This, too, is morning work, not glamorous, but necessary. Each flake removed from the stone releases a sharp chick, a sound that blends with the grinding of seeds and the crackle of the fire into a kind of morning music. If you were to sit quietly among them, you might notice how much of the morning is filled with small, unremarkable motions, kneeling to reach for a stick, shifting a stone slightly so the fire burns evenly, shaking out a hide to dislodge bits of dirt before draping it over a frame. None of these tasks, on their own, seem urgent or significant, yet together they maintain the rhythm of the group's life. The older woman who began the morning by coaxing the fire now rests on a low stone, hands folded loosely in her lap. She watches the others without directing them. Her presence itself is a kind of guidance. Younger women occasionally glance her way, perhaps to see if she approves of how the hearth burns or how the grinding progresses. She rarely speaks, but her eyes are sharp. She has seen countless mornings like this, and knows the quiet pleasure of seeing things unfold without disorder. By mid-morning, the sun is higher, and the chill has lifted enough that some people move out into the surrounding grassland. A pair of women, each carrying a woven basket, set off to gather edible greens. Their movements are measured, bending, scanning the ground, plucking carefully. They speak in low tones, sharing bits of remembered knowledge about which leaves are best eaten raw, which are better boiled, which have been seen to cause stomach trouble in the past. Knowledge here is not kept in books. It lives in the mouths and hands of the people, passed along in fragments during work like this. Back in the camp, a few children kneel beside a shallow pit, drawing shapes in the dirt with sticks. These shapes are not art for art's sake. They mimic the marks their elders make when sketching the location of a water source or marking where certain berries were last found. Even play has a way of echoing survival skills. Meanwhile, the fire is kept burning at a steady low heat. A skin of water warms at its edge, not boiling, but just enough to soften whatever is added later. The grinding stone is still in motion, though now in different hands. Work is shared fluidly. When one person's arms tire, another takes their place without ceremony. As the morning draws on, the camp feels fully awake. The air is filled with the mingled scents of smoke, damp earth, and plant matter. The distant call of a bird punctuates the soft chatter. There is no single leader directing the flow. Tasks emerge from the needs of the moment. Guided by experience and habit, you can imagine yourself sitting near the hearth, legs folded beneath you, feeling the faint warmth on your skin. Your eyes follow the slow, deliberate actions of those around you, noticing how each movement serves the quiet machinery of daily life. There is a sense that time here is less a straight path and more a wide, slow river. Each morning, simply another bend in its course. By the time the sun has reached its place overhead, the baskets brought by the gathering women are half filled, and the children's games have shifted to helping with food preparation. Morning has passed without rush, without crisis, sustained by the simple, repeated motions that have kept life steady here for generations. And, as the midday tasks begin to take shape, the roasting, the pounding, the weaving, you might wonder, in the countless mornings like this that stretched over tens of thousands of years, how much of human history was quietly built on these small, unnoticed acts. The shift from morning to afternoon in a Paleolithic camp does not happen abruptly. There is no bell to ring in a change of pace, no horn to signal a break. Instead, it's more like a gradual slide, the kind you barely notice, until suddenly the shadows have turned and the light has taken on a warmer, flatter tone. The morning's crispness softens, and the air carries a deeper scent of sun-warmed earth. By now, the work of the day is fully underway. The morning's tasks, grinding seeds, gathering greens, repairing tools, have spilled naturally into the longer projects that require more daylight and more patience. For the women of the camp, these hours are often the most productive. The young children, their bellies comfortably full from the morning's roasted roots and seeds, are calmer now, content to play nearby or nap in the shade of hides strung between poles. In the center of the camp, a few women sit cross-legged on the ground, each with a different task before her. One is weaving strips of animal sinew into a net, not the kind of net you'd picture for catching fish in open water, but one used to snare smaller animals or even gather certain plants in bundles. Her fingers work automatically, pulling each strip taut, knotting with a practiced twist. The sinew itself has been softened by soaking and rubbing with animal fat, making it more pliable. Every now and then, she pauses to adjust the tension or trim an uneven edge with a flake of stone. Beside her, another woman is working on a piece of clothing, if it can be called clothing in the way we think of it now. It's a wrap of hide, stitched together with sinew thread. The seams rough but strong. She works with an awl, a sharp bone tool for piercing holes, pushing it through the thick hide and then threading sinew through the opening. Her hands are steady, her movements small and controlled. In the quiet, you can hear the faint pop of the oar breaking through the hide, followed by the whisper of the thread being pulled tight near the fire. Someone is boiling a pot of roots and greens in a hide-lined pit filled with hot stones. The stones were heated earlier in the fire until they glowed faintly, then lifted carefully into the water with a pair of forked sticks. Each time the stones cool, they are replaced with hotter ones, keeping the water at a gentle simmer. The smell is earthy, almost grassy, with a faint tang from the greens. The woman tending the pot stirs occasionally with a carved wooden stick, not to keep anything from burning. Nothing here will scorch, but to make sure the heat moves evenly through the food. A little farther from the hearth, two women kneel, side by side, breaking apart the ribs of a recently hunted deer. They are not butchering the meat that was done the previous day, but stripping the bones clean and cracking them to reach the marrow. This is not hurried work. The cracking is done carefully, so the splinters can be collected for later use. Bone shards are useful for making tools or awls. The marrow is eaten fresh or stored in small skin pouches, pressed with snow or cool earth if the season allows. Children weave in and out of these tasks, sometimes imitating, sometimes genuinely helping. A girl of about 6 crouches beside the net maker, carefully wrapping a thin strip of sinew around her own small stick. Her knots are clumsy, but no one corrects her sharply. The learning here is slow, by watching and doing, without the pressure to get it right the first time. The older children fetch water when asked, bring back handfuls of herbs, or chase after a piece of hide that the wind has lifted toward the edge of the camp. As the sun climbs toward its highest point, some women move to the shade. A hide canopy has been propped up between 2 mammoth bones, casting a wide patch of dappled shadow. Under it, a group sits together, talking in low voices while their hands remain busy. Their conversation drifts between the practical and the personal, where berries were last found, whether the men hunting today will return before nightfall, how the clouds seem to promise rain within a day or two. Sometimes they lapse into comfortable silence, the only sound being the soft rasp of hide under a scraper or the rhythmic plating of sinew. Not all work is done in the camp itself. Beyond the shelters, a pair of women are digging for edible roots in a patch of soft soil near a stream. They use short, pointed sticks to loosen the earth, working slowly, feeling for the shape of each root before pulling it free. The dirt under their nails is not a concern. They will rinse their hands in the stream before heading back. One of them hums softly, a melody without words, the kind passed down more as a sound than a song. Back in camp, the smell of cooking has deepened. The simmering pot is nearly ready, and someone has begun mashing part of its contents into a thick paste on a flat stone. This paste will be spread thin on a hide and left near the fire to dry, becoming a kind of preserved food that can be stored for days or even weeks. The rest will be eaten soon, shared among everyone present. By early afternoon, the heat of the day has settled in. It is not oppressive, but enough that movements slow. People seek shade where they can, continuing their tasks in the cooler patches of the camp. A few lie down briefly, not for a full sleep, but for a rest, eyes closed, hands still loosely holding the tools they were working with. There is no guilt in resting. Energy must be saved for the hours ahead, when the light begins to fade and the evening's work begins. Some women turn their attention to maintenance of the shelters. This involves shaking out the hides to remove dirt, tightening lashings where the wind has loosened them, and brushing off any leaves or debris that have fallen overnight. It's a quiet sort of upkeep, the kind that happens daily and often goes unnoticed, but without it, the shelters would quickly weaken. One woman replaces a worn strap with a freshly cut strip of rawhide, pulling it tight and tying it with a knot she's likely tied thousands of times before, a little before the sun begins to sink. A few people head out to gather firewood. This is not done in great loads. Each person brings back what they can carry. The women who go walk slowly, scanning for dry branches, breaking them into manageable lengths as they go. They talk as they walk, their words mingling with the sounds of birds calling in the trees. Sometimes they stop to inspect a plant or a patch of mushrooms, discussing whether it's worth taking back to camp. In the final stretch of the afternoon, there is a subtle shift in mood. Work that can be finished before evening is wrapped up, and projects that require more time are set aside in a state where they can be resumed tomorrow. The netmaker ties off her last knot for the day, inspecting the work with a small nod before rolling the net carefully. The woman stitching clothing tucks away her sinew thread and all, folding the hide neatly. The cook ladles out portions of the root stew into shallow bowls carved from wood or shaped from horn, passing them to those nearby. As they eat, the women talk softly, the afternoon light casting long shadows behind them. There is a sense of steady continuity, not a day marked by extraordinary events, but one that fits neatly into the pattern of countless others before it. The food is warm, the fire steady, the work done for now. Children lean against the mothers, chewing slowly, eyelids drooping a little in the late-day warmth. When the bowls are empty, they are rinsed in the stream or wiped clean with handfuls of grass. Tools are gathered into their usual places, a flat stone for grinding here, a basket of sinew there. The camp feels settled, as if it has exhaled. Soon, evening will bring its own set of tasks, but for now, the women rest in the fading light, watching the sun inch toward the horizon dot, and in that quiet pause between afternoon and evening, you can sense the deep patience of a life lived close to the earth, where every day is measured not by hours, but by the steady rhythm of work, rest, and the turning of the sky. Evening in the camp begins long before the sun actually disappears. It begins in the way the air changes, cooling slightly, loosening the heaviness of the afternoon heat. It begins in the way shadows stretch, turning long and thin, pooling in hollows between the rocks and along the base of the shelters, and it begins in the quiet, instinctive shift in everyone's movements, as if the whole camp is leaning toward the hearth, without even thinking about it. The women know this hour well. It is when the day's outer work narrows to the circle of light and warmth that will soon dominate the night. By now, most tasks have been tidied away or paused. The tools of the afternoon, scrapers, awls, digging sticks are gathered into their places so they can be found easily tomorrow. Hides have been stretched or folded. Baskets have been emptied of their gathered contents or tucked neatly beneath the shelters. The air smells faintly of earth and ash, carrying with it a cool breath that whispers of the hours ahead. One of the first priorities is the fire. Not to start it, that never happens from scratch, unless it's absolutely necessary, but to tend it, to coax the afternoon embers into the steady, living flame that will carry them through the night. A woman crouches by the hearth, her hair catching the last gold of the setting sun. She leans in and blows softly, coaxing a deeper glow from the coals. Another woman adds small, dry twigs, arranging them carefully so the flames can catch without smothering the embers. There's a small sigh when the fire takes the comfort of knowing that, for another night, the heart of the camp will burn steadily. While the fire is being built up, the others gather wood that was collected earlier. Some of the larger pieces are set aside for later in the night, when the flames will need feeding while most of the camp sleeps. The smaller pieces are stacked nearby, easy to reach during cooking or while sitting close to the warmth. As the sun drops lower, the sky deepens from pale blue to a richer, warmer hue. The women pause now and then to watch the changing light, not with any sense of ceremony, but with the quiet recognition that it is worth looking at. Far to the west, the horizon is washed in soft oranges and muted pinks. the kind that seem to dissolve even as you look at them. To the east, the blue is darkening into the first hints of night. Now the evening work begins in earnest. Some of it mirrors the tasks of the afternoon, but in smaller, more intimate scale. Around the fire, women bring out the work that can be done while sitting close, weaving cords, mending baskets, scraping thin strips of hide for stitching. The movements are smaller, the tools lighter, chosen so they can be held comfortably. In the lap, the soundscape of the camp changes with the hour. The sharper noises of the day, the crack of bone, the pounding of roots, the scraping of hides give way to softer ones. The faint click of a needle through sinew, the rustle of dried grass being twisted into cord, the quiet murmur of voices. There is laughter sometimes, but even it is softened, as though the firelight itself has wrapped the voices in warmth. Children cluster near the fire as well, some curled into their mother's sides, others still restless and playing. A few wander around the edge of the firelight, their shadows huge and wobbly against the hides of the shelters. An older girl tries her hand at weaving, her tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth as she concentrates. A toddler clutches a small, smooth stone, holding it as though it were the most precious of treasures. The smell of evening food begins to drift through the air. The pot from earlier has been topped up with a few fresh ingredients, perhaps some berries gathered during the day, or a scrap of dried meat saved from a hunt. The fire pops softly as the stew simmers, sending up faint curls of steam into the cooling night. Someone turns a flat cake of ground seeds over a hot stone, the edges crisping slightly in the heat. The smell is nutty, comforting, a promise of warmth inside and out. Beyond the circle of firelight, the world has grown dim. The last streaks of sunlight fade, leaving only the faint afterglow along the horizon. The first stars appear, scattered and shy at first, then more boldly, until the sky is freckled with them. Somewhere far off, an animal calls, not threatening, just part of the night's background hum. The women glance toward the sound but do not startle. They know its voice, know that it will keep its distance. After food is shared, the pace of the camp slows further. Some women lean back against the supports of the shelters, continuing their work in a more relaxed way. Others set aside their tools entirely, letting their hands rest in their laps while they talk or simply watch the fire. The younger ones may still be busy, eager to finish a cord, to try one more row of stitches before the light becomes too dim. And there are stories. Not every night, and not always long ones. But tonight there is a gentle thread of words winding through the camp. One woman speaks quietly, her hands still moving on the piece of hide she's stitching. The story is not told in a single stretch. It comes in pieces, with pauses for thought or to adjust a knot. The others listen without interruption, their eyes on their work or the flames. The story is familiar, perhaps told many times before, but it has the comfort of repetition. For some, the weaving of sinew or grass continues even as the fire burns lower. The rhythm is almost hypnotic. Over, under, pull tight, repeat. Fingers move as if they know the pattern without needing thought. The light from the fire catches the strands, making them glimmer briefly before they disappear into the shadows again. By now, the children are beginning to fade. A baby falls asleep against her mother's chest, her small breaths warm against skin. The toddler who guarded the stone so fiercely earlier has dropped it somewhere in the grass, forgotten in the pull of sleep. A few older children curl together, near the fire, heads resting on folded hides, their faces slack in the glow. The fire is fed one last time for the evening, the wood arranged so it will burn slowly through the first stretch of the night. Women wrap themselves in hides or furs, drawing them close against the chill. Tools are tucked away, work set aside until morning. The stories drift into silence, replaced by the soft crackle of the flames and the quiet shifting of bodies settling into rest. The night is not fully still. Somewhere out beyond the light, the river runs with its steady murmur. The wind moves gently through the trees, carrying scents of damp earth and far-off rain. But here, in the circle of the camp, there is warmth and the slow, breathing rhythm of those gathered together, and so, under the watch of stars and the soft guard of firelight, the women drift towards sleep, some quickly, some lingering with thoughts and the last slow movements of their hands, but all wrapped in the deep patience of another day well lived, ready to be folded into the quiet memory of countless nights before it. Night in the camp is not one unbroken silence. It is a slow procession of smaller moments, folded one into another, so that the hours pass almost without anyone noticing their going. By the time true darkness has settled, the women are wrapped in layers of fur and hide, their bodies curved toward the fire as though drawn to it by some deep, unspoken instinct. The flames have quieted from their earlier brightness, settling into a steady glow, each ember a tiny sun in its own right. For a time there is almost no movement. The day's labors have pressed a deep tiredness into every limb, and most women slip quickly into the shallow, drifting half-sleep of those who know they must wake again before morning. The fire is their guardian now, and it must be tended. In the deep hours, it is as essential as breath. The role of night watcher is not formal, but it is understood. Someone always wakes, whether by chance or by the silent arrangement made earlier in the evening. Tonight it is the eldest of the group, her hair silvered, her joints slow, who stirs first. She does not rise abruptly. She lies still for a moment, listening to the layered sounds of the night, the crack of a cooling log, the rustle of someone shifting under a hide, the faint, high whine of wind far above the treetops. Beyond that, a deeper quiet presses in from all sides. When she finally moves, it is with careful slowness. She leans forward, feeding the fire with a piece of wood no bigger than her arm. The flames lick it greedily, the orange light brushing her lined face before settling back into a more patient burn. She stays awake for a while, watching the way the fire bends and sighs with each breath of wind, her thoughts private and unhurried. Sometimes she will mend something small in these hours, a loose knot in a cord, a tear in a pouch, but more often she simply sits, her hands folded in her lap, eyes following the slow collapse of embers into ash. When her head begins to nod, she nudges the woman nearest to her. There is no irritation in the waking, no sense of intrusion. It is part of the rhythm, as ordinary as passing a tool from one hand to another. The younger woman rises stiffly, rubbing her eyes. She adds another stick to the fire, then settles in for her turn. She listens for any changes beyond the camp, not with fear, but with the steady alertness that comes from years of nights like this. From time to time, There are small, solitary rituals in these watches. One woman likes to check the basket of embers kept aside for the morning fire, shifting them so they keep their heat. Another smooths the hides at the sleeping area's edge, ensuring that no loose corner will let in the chill. The tasks are not urgent, but they are binding threads that keep the camp safe and whole. Outside the ring of light, the world is a darkness so complete it feels solid. The stars overhead blaze sharply in the cold air, their light almost brittle. Somewhere, an owl gives a low, rounded call, answered faintly by another in the distance. The river keeps its steady voice, unchanged from day to night, a soft and constant presence. There are moments in the deep night when wakefulness drifts into quiet reflection. A woman may think about the day just past, the handful of berries she found beneath a frost-bitten bush, the laughter of the children chasing one another between the shelters. She might think of tomorrow's work, picturing which tools will need repair or which patch of earth might still yield roots worth digging. Sometimes she thinks of nothing at all, letting her gaze sink into the glowing coals until her mind is as warm and slow as the fire itself. The sleeping bodies around the hearth shift now and again. Someone murmurs softly in her sleep. A child rolls over, tucking herself deeper under a hide. The baby, who has been quiet since nursing earlier, gives a sudden sigh, the kind that rises from deep in the chest and melts into stillness again. By now, the fire is more ember than flame. It gives a steady heat, a heartbeat of light. The woman on watch adds a few thin sticks, enough to coax up a soft flicker, but not so much as to waste the fuel meant for later. She knows the fire must last until the pale edge of dawn appears. In the east, the hours between midnight and morning are the slowest. They stretch like unspooled thread, without the markers of day. No sun shifting across the sky. No busy hands passing tools or food. Here, the only measure of time is the settling of wood into ash, the small changes in the sky overhead. And yet, even in this deep stillness, there is life. The night creatures keep their quiet patrols. A fox slipping between the trees, a bat darting briefly near the firelight's edge before vanishing again. The air smells faintly of frost and wood smoke, a pairing as old as human memory. As the night bends toward its last hours, there is a subtle change in the darkness. It lightens, not yet into true morning, but enough that the stars begin to dim at their edges. The watcher, seeing this, adds a larger piece of wood to the fire. The flames answer eagerly, stretching taller, their light warming the faces still buried in sleep. Some of the women begin to stir without quite waking. A shoulder shifts, a hand emerges from beneath a hide only to retreat into its warmth. First bird calls from somewhere beyond the river, its voice tentative, as though testing the air for morning. Now the fire's light feels different, not the solitary glow of the night watch, but the herald of the day's return. The woman on watch knows she will soon be joined by others. She takes a final moment to watch the slow transformation of the camp, the shadows growing softer, the sky above paling by degrees, the familiar shapes of the shelters and tools emerging once again from the dark. And when the first true edge of dawn finally touches the horizon, it is as though the whole camp exhales at once. The night is folded away, tucked into the long memory of all the nights before it, and the women rested, or not begin to rise, ready to take up once more the slow, steady work of living close to the earth. Morning does not arrive all at once here. It seeps into the camp as gently as water soaking into dry ground. Long before the sun itself appears, there is a change in the air, a thinning of darkness, a faint silvering at the edges of the sky. The fire, which was the only light for so many hours, now has a quiet rival in the pale wash coming from the east. The woman who has been tending it, through the last stretch of night, crouches forward and feeds it with thicker logs. This is the rekindling, not just for warmth, but for cooking, for light enough to see the first work of the day. The wood catches slowly, sending up thin fingers of smoke that drift low in the cool air. The smoke curls through the camp, wrapping everything in its familiar, bittersweet scent. One by one, the women begin to stir, rising from their nests of hide and fur. Some move quickly, eager to stretch limbs stiffened from sleep. Others linger, in that warm pocket between waking and rising. The first sounds are soft, a low greeting, a cough into the hand, the muffled rustle of a child pulling a hide over her head to shut out the growing light. A pot of water is set near the fire, too, warm. Someone adds a handful of dried leaves, the faint scent of them carrying a promise of something sharp and waking on the tongue. Roots gathered the day before are pulled from their net bags, scraped clean with a careful rhythm. The meal will be plain boiled roots, perhaps softened with a pinch of ground seed. But in these early hours, it is enough to have something warm and filling to share. The sky now has more color in it, not yet gold, but a soft wash of blue-gray, like river stone under shallow water. The shapes of the land grow clearer, the line of low hills beyond the camp, the dark weave of trees edging the horizon. The river's surface catches the changing light, shifting from black to steel to a faint, rippling silver. Some of the women set out before the meal is ready. They carry small baskets slung over one shoulder, the cords cutting gently into the hide of their tunics. These are the early gatherers, the ones who prefer to move while the air is still cool and the ground damp with dew. They will look for anything worth taking: berries, seeds shaken loose in the night wind, mushrooms sheltered in the folds of earth. Every small find matters. Nothing is dismissed as too little. Their steps are soft, practiced to make as little noise as possible. Partly this is habit, the same skill used in hunting or in moving through dangerous places. Partly it is because the morning itself feels fragile, as though too much noise might break it. Back at the fire, the rest of the women begin their quieter work. Hides are shaken out and laid across low stones to air. Tools left by the fire overnight are checked for damage. A cracked handle in need of mending, a flint edge dulled by use. A child wakes fully and wanders to the fire, still half wrapped in a hide, blinking at the brightness. She is given a warm root to hold, more for comfort than for hunger. The smell of the boiling pot thickens in the air. A handful of crushed seeds is stirred in, giving the food a faint, nutty scent. It is not a feast, but it is warm, and when the gatherers return, they will eat it gratefully. The sun finally shows itself, a low disk rising behind the trees. Its light is soft, more a promise than a heat, but it changes everything. Shadows stretch long, making the shelters look taller. The frost in the grass flashes briefly before melting into the ground. The mist along the river begins to lift, curling away into nothing. The early gatherers return, their baskets holding modest treasures, a small clutch of berries, 2 handfuls of seeds, a few thin mushrooms wrapped in a broad leaf. The finds are passed around without fuss. Each is added to the day's store, the berries set aside for the children, the seeds ground into meal for later. The meal is shared without ceremony. The women sit in a loose circle, passing the pot from hand to hand, eating directly from it with carved wooden spoons. The warmth seeps into their bellies, their fingers. A child giggles at some small joke, her voice carrying lightly in the morning. After eating, the camp settles into the day's first real work. The women split into pairs or small groups, each turning to a different task. One group begins sorting the hides that will be scraped and softened today. Another works at repairing nets, the sinew cords pulled tight and knotted with care. A third heads toward the river, carrying tools for digging roots along the softer banks. The mist-blue hours are fading now, giving way to the full light of morning. The fire burns steadily, the pot cleaned and set aside for the next meal. The sky is brightening toward gold. The quiet of the night is fully gone, replaced by the soft clatter of tools, the low hum of voices, and the steady, patient rhythm of work, beginning again, as it always does, as it always has, in the long, unbroken chain of mornings stretching back through time. By the time the sun has risen high enough to warm the camp in full, the faint haze of morning has burned away. The light now falls unbroken, stretching long shadows between the shelters and making the river glitter as if it were lined with tiny flakes of white stone. It is not hot yet, that will come later, but there is a certain weight in the air that belongs only to the hours after morning's coolness has fled. The women have already sorted themselves into the tasks that will carry them through until the day tips toward evening. There is no formal call to work, no leader's command. It happens naturally, as it has for generations. Every hand knows its skill, and every skill finds its place. One pair works at the hides, great weighty sheets of once living skin that must be softened, scraped, and cured if they are to become clothing, bedding, or shelter. A hide laid across. The frame is almost as tall as a woman. The scraper, a broad tool of flint bound to a smoothed bone handle, is drawn downward again and again, the motions slow but steady. Each stroke pulls away the last traces of flesh or fat, revealing a pale, smooth surface beneath. It is heavy work for the arms and shoulders, and the women often change places to keep the rhythm going without exhausting themselves. Nearby, another small group works with finer tools, bone needles, sinew thread, and scraps of softer hide or woven fiber. They sit cross-legged in the sun, sewing repairs into garments that have thinned at the knees or split along the seams. The stitches are small and close, almost invisible when finished. For a moment the conversation between them drifts toward laughter. A quiet story about someone tripping over a snare line last week, told and retold with slightly more detail each time. The sound of grinding carries across the camp, a slow, circular rhythm of stone on stone. 2 women sit at low grinding slabs, working seeds and dried roots into meal. The air smells faintly nutty, with a hint of dust that clings to the nostrils. Beside them, a child of no more than 5 squats, with a small stone in her hands, imitating their motions. Her grinding is clumsy, spilling more than it crushes. But no one corrects her sharply. This is how learning happens here. By watching, by trying, by becoming part of the rhythm before skill takes root. Children weave through the camp like threads. Between stitches, the smallest ones stay close to their mothers or older sisters, content to play with sticks, scraps of hide, or pebbles smoothed by the river. The older ones have small tasks, carrying a bundle of dried grass for kindling, fetching water from the shallows, chasing away curious birds that edge too close to the drying hides. These errands are given without ceremony, folded into the flow of the day. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes the need for shade. One of the women adjusts the angle of a hide stretched between two poles, casting a broader shadow over where she works. In another corner of the camp, a woman smears a mixture of clay and water onto her forearms and face. It dries quickly into a thin, cool crust that keeps the heat from biting too sharply. She will have to wash it away before evening, but for now it lets her keep working without the sting of the sun. Food preparation continues almost without pause. A net of fish, caught in the early hours by others in the group, has been brought to shore and emptied onto a flat stone. The fish are small, silver-scaled, and wriggling faintly, still alive when they are laid down. One woman begins the work of cleaning them, her hands quick and sure. She removes the heads and guts, setting the waste aside for bait, and then lays the bodies in the sun to dry. In a few hours they will be ready for smoking over the fire in the shade of one shelter. A woman sits with a bundle of plant stems spread across her lap. She strips the fibers from each one with her fingernails, pulling them into long, thin threads. These will be twisted together into cords strong enough for nets, snares, or bindings. It is slow work, but her hands move as if on their own, the skill so deeply ingrained that her attention can wander to the small group of children sitting nearby. She tells them a quiet tale while she works, a story of how the river first learned to sing, passed down from her own mother. The children listen with a stillness rare for their age, their eyes half closed in the bright light. The day has reached its middle, when the first wave of fatigue begins to settle over the camp. The warmth of the sun presses down, making every movement a little slower. Those working with the heavy hides take longer pauses between each scraping stroke. The grinders lean back from their stones to stretch their backs. Someone fetches water in a large skin bag, pouring it into carved wooden cups that are passed from hand to hand. The water is cool and carries the faint mineral taste of the river. No one stops completely. There is too much to be done, but the pace softens. Some tasks, like net mending or fiber twisting, can be done while sitting in the shade. Others, like carrying bundles of gathered firewood to the camp's edge, are left for those with more energy to spare. In these hours, teaching happens more deliberately. A young girl, perhaps 8 years old, is shown how to set a simple snare from a loop of cord and a bent sapling. Her teacher, one of the older women, demonstrates the knot twice before letting the girl try it herself. The first attempt slips loose almost immediately, but there is no scolding, just a calm, patient reminder of how to pull the cord tight. The second knot holds. The girl's smile is small but bright, and she sets the snare aside for use later. By the time the sun has passed its highest point, the camp smells of drying fish, fresh cut roots, and the faint sweetness of crushed berries brought in by a returning gatherer. She sets her basket down with a sigh, dust clinging to her calves. The berries are tipped into a shallow bowl, their deep purple skins staining her fingers. A few are eaten at once. The rest will be mashed into a paste and spread thin to dry, making them last beyond the brief season when they grow. The afternoon still stretches ahead, long and slow. The work will continue, but for now there is a moment of quiet, a lull where the camp breathes together. The sounds of scraping, grinding, and soft conversation blending into the steady hum of life lived under the open sky. The sun has begun its slow descent, pulling the light into a deeper gold that softens the edges of every stone and branch. Long shadows spill across the camp, stretching toward the river, curling into the open spaces between the shelters. The heat that pressed so heavily in the middle hours is loosening now, releasing its hold so that the air feels easier to breathe. This is the time when the day begins to bend toward evening. No one calls for a change, yet the pace of the camp subtly shifts. The movements of the women grow more measured, not hurried but deliberate, as though each knows there is still much to finish before the light fades completely. At the hide frames, the scraping is nearly done for the day. The edges of the hides have been smoothed, the inner surfaces cleaned to a soft, even pale. The women stretch their arms, rolling their shoulders against the weight of the hours they've worked. The tools are laid aside, the hides left to dry further in the lowering light. By the fire pit, food preparation has become the center of attention. The cleaned fish from earlier in the day have been brought back, their flesh now firm from drying. In the sun, a low rack is set above the fire, and the fish are laid out in neat rows. The smoke curls upward, pale and fragrant, carrying the smell of wood and the faint salt of the river. Beside it, roots and tubers are set into the embers to roast, their skins slowly blackening while the insides grow soft and sweet. A small group of women works together to mash berries into a thick, deep-colored paste. They use smooth stones, too. Crush them against a flat slab, the juice staining both stone and hands. The paste is spread thin over large leaves, which are then laid on a raised frame so the air can pass over them and dry them for storage. Children return from their wandering tasks, some carrying small bundles of sticks, others just in time, to watch the roasting and smoking with eager eyes. The youngest ones are given bits of roasted root, still hot enough to make them blow on it before biting. Their laughter carries lightly through the air. In the space between two shelters, a woman sits with a basket of fresh-gathered greens. She picks through them, removing tough stems or yellowed leaves, and sets aside the best for the evening meal. Another woman joins her with a small bundle of aromatic leaves, not for food, but for the fire. When tossed onto the embers, they will scent the smoke, keeping insects away and leaving the camp smelling faintly of their sharp green bite. Further toward the edge of camp, the cord making continues. The woman, twisting fibers, has moved her work into the shade cast by a tall rock, where the air is cooler. A younger girl sits beside her, learning the rhythm of twisting roll between the palms, fold, twist again. The motions are small, but they add up over hours into lengths of cord that will bind hides, mend tools, and set snares. As the shadows deepen, the sounds of the camp take on a different quality. In the brighter hours, they were sharper. The tap of tools, the grind of stone, the quick exchanges of conversation. Now they are lower, more even, as though the day's work has worn off the edges of voices. Even the children seem to speak in softer tones, absorbed in watching the fish smoke or the roots roast. There is a quiet sort of camaraderie in these hours. Two women who worked separately all morning now sit together, hands busy with different tasks, but their voices low and easy, carrying memories of the past season. Who hunted where? When the river last flooded? What signs of animals have been seen nearby? Another pair trades small bundles of goods. One gives a piece of cord in exchange for a handful of berries. The exchange done with no formal count, only mutual trust. The light begins to turn orange at the edges, brushing the tops of the grasses, and the faces of those working in the open. The warmth that lingers from the day is now pleasant, no longer heavy. Someone calls for water to be brought from the river, and two older children go together with a skin bag, returning with it sloshing. Full, they set it by the fire, where wooden cups are dipped and passed around. The evening meal begins to take shape. Smoked fish is lifted from the rack, still warm and fragrant. The roasted roots are pulled from the embers and split open, releasing clouds of sweet steam. The greens are tossed onto the fire for a brief wilt, their sharp scent mingling with the wood smoke. The women eat as they work, a bite here, a sip there, keeping their hands moving until the last preparations are complete. Only when the sun touches the far edge of the land, sinking behind low hills, leaving the river in shadow, do they slow enough to sit together. The meal is shared without ceremony, pieces passed from hand to hand, children fed first without being told. As the sky deepens toward dusk, the camp grows quieter still. The work of the day is mostly behind them, though small tasks remain. A pot is set on the fire for boiling water, and the women speak softly about what must be done tomorrow. More gathering, more cord, perhaps the mending of a hunting net that has frayed. The day's heat is leaving with the light. Already, someone adds another piece of wood to the fire, ensuring it will burn steadily through the next few hours. The smoke drifts upward, carrying the smell of cooked fish and roasted roots into the gathering night. The camp breathes together in these last moments of late afternoon, full from the day's work, the meal warm in their bellies, and the promise of rest drawing closer with every lengthening shadow. The light thins until it is neither day nor full night, a blue that seeps into every hollow and clings to the ridges of stone. The outlines of the camp soften. The tall grass sways in the dim, its movement more sensed than seen. The air has cooled, enough that breath comes easily, carrying with it the faint scent of the river and the sharper edge of the fire's smoke. The women know this hour well. It is the time when work no longer presses, but still fills the hands. Around the fire pit, embers glow deep orange, the wood cracking softly as it shifts and settles. One woman crouches close, nudging the blackened ends inward with a stick, so that the heat gathers at the center. Another leans over with a bundle of small, dry twigs, feeding them in one at a time until the flames flare just enough to push back the darkness. The children are quieter now, their earlier restlessness smoothed away by food and the dimming light. Some curl near their mothers, watching the fire as though the patterns in its movement hold some secret meaning. Others sit together in a small knot, drowsily plucking at bits of grass or twisting loose threads from the edges of a woven mat. Weaving begins again, but in the low light it is slower, more meditative. Strips of sinew are softened in warm water, then drawn through deft fingers to become part of a growing net. Beside that, a larger weaving frame holds a half-finished mat made from reeds gathered by the river. The hands that work on it move in, a steady rhythm, over, under, over the motions so practiced they need little sight to guide them. A few women work on mending the day's last repairs. A seam in a hide tunic is tightened with fresh cord. A small tear in a pouch is closed neatly with stitches that match the original. One woman sits apart, polishing a bone needle until it gleams faintly in the firelight. The talk is quiet and sparse now. Voices murmur, more to acknowledge presence than to tell long stories. Sometimes there is laughter, soft and low, rising and fading like a ripple in still water. A baby stirs and fusses. The mother rocks gently, crooning under her breath until the child's breathing evens again. The fire is tended with care, not fed to roaring strength, but kept at the steady, glowing heart that will last deep into the night. Dried leaves are added occasionally, sending up a fragrant smoke that drifts through the camp and out toward the dark line of the trees. One woman steps to the edge of the camp to look up at the sky. The first stars have appeared, sharp and bright. Against the darkening blue, she lingers for a moment, tracing a familiar cluster with her eyes before returning to the warmth of the fire. Others glance upward as well, their gazes quick, as if checking the weather written in the constellations. As the blue fades into true night, the camp draws closer together. Mats are unrolled and hides laid out. The weaving slows to a stop. The tools are set neatly aside. The day's final tasks are done, and now the hands are free to rest. Some still speak, telling short, winding stories, fragments of memory from other seasons, or simple retellings of the day's events. A child asks a question about the stars, and the answer comes in a patient voice, layered with the soft rhythm of an old explanation. The fire pops once, sending a brief shower of sparks upward, and for a moment all eyes turn to watch them fade into the dark. The night has fully claimed the land now. It's quiet deep enough to hear the rustle of leaves beyond the camp and the distant call of some small creature by the river. The women settle in, drawing hides over their shoulders, the warmth of the fire licking gently at their faces. Words drift into silence. The last exchange is no louder than the sigh of wind through grass. The camp is still, yet it feels alive. The low glow of the embers, the soft shifting of bodies settling in, the watchfulness of those who will keep the fire through the first hours of night. This is the end of the day's outward labor, and the beginning of its inward rest. A slow folding into warmth and shadow, with the quiet comfort of knowing the same stars have watched over them for as long as anyone can remember. The night is fully settled now, the kind of stillness where even the trees seem to have stopped their whispering. The camp lies in a gentle sprawl, each figure wrapped in hides and shadows, their breathing slow and even. Only the faint orange glow of the fire's heart marks this place against the dark expanse of the world. One woman sits nearest the embers, her knees drawn up beneath her cloak. She holds a long stick in her hand, occasionally nudging the blackened wood to keep the coals from collapsing into a lifeless heap. Every so often, she leans forward to place a small piece of fuel onto the glowing center, careful not to rouse the flames too brightly. It is a work of patience, done without hurry. a rhythm as old as the camp itself. Another woman stirs from her mat nearby, shifting from rest into watchfulness. The change is almost soundless, a rustle of hide, a muffled exhale. She takes her place at the opposite side of the fire, where she can see both the camp and the tree line beyond. For a while, neither speaks. The night watch is not for conversation, but for listening. Far beyond the circle of firelight, the wild is alive in its own quiet way. From the direction of the river comes the faint, regular splash of water over stone. A single insect hums close by, tracing an erratic line before disappearing into the dark. Once, the far-off crack of a branch carries through the still air, not sharp enough to raise alarm, but enough to draw both women's eyes toward the shadowed edge of the clearing. Above them, the stars have multiplied, scattered thickly across the black sky. The women look up from time to time, their eyes lingering on familiar shapes, the long curve of one constellation, the faint glimmer of another that will fade with the turning of the seasons. Out here, there is no counting the hours by a clock. The slow wheel of the sky is time enough. Every so often, one of the sleeping figures shifts, murmuring softly, only to sink back into the warm pocket of sleep. A child lets out a sigh, small and content, curling closer to its mother. The sound is brief, and soon the steady breathing of the camp resumes its gentle rhythm. The fire, though quiet, is the center of everything. Its heat is not strong now, but steady, a low warmth that seeps into the air and keeps the sharp bite of the night at bay. The embers pulse gently, each breath of wind drawing a faint flare from within their depths. One of the watchers takes a strip of dried meat from a pouch and chews slowly, the taste more for passing time than for hunger. She offers another piece to her companion, who accepts it with a nod. The faint crackle of dried sinew, the only sound between them. Occasionally, an owl calls from somewhere beyond the camp, its voice low and rounded, carrying across the open space between the trees. The women listen, not with fear but with the quiet acknowledgement that the owl, too, has its night work to keep dot in the stillness. Thoughts wander without urgency to the day's small events, to memories of seasons past, to faces of those no longer in the camp. Night watch has always been this way, a time for vigilance, but also for the drifting kind of reflection that comes when the rest of the world is sleeping. The women trade places once or twice, one stretching her legs or tending briefly to the fire while the other scans the dark beyond. Neither expects danger, yet the habit of watching is woven deep, older than memory, older than any one generation. Hours pass like water over stone, slow and quiet. The cold deepens, but the fire's heart endures, a red core within its black shell. Soon, the first grey thread of morning will begin to unpick the night, but for now, the world remains held in shadow, cradled in the soft, measured breath of sleep. The world, at this hour, feels as though it is holding its breath. The fire still glows, a deep, steady orange at its core, but the darkness around it has thinned, not quite enough to reveal shapes and colors, yet enough to give a faint sense of space. The night watchers have learned to read this change. It is the moment when the black dome of the sky begins, almost imperceptibly, to fade at the edges. One woman is still seated close to the embers, her cloak drawn snug around her shoulders. She leans forward, not with urgency, but with the practiced gentleness of someone who has done this hundreds of times before. She takes a small bundle of twigs from beside her mat, dry, thin, and carefully kept, apart from the dampness of the ground, and feeds them one by one into the ember's heart. They catch with a faint hiss, sending up tiny threads of smoke that drift and curl in the cool air. Her companion, the second watcher, shifts on her haunches, stretching her legs. She stands for a moment, arms raised slightly as if to coax, the stiffness from her shoulders. Her breath comes in slow puffs that mist and vanish. She scans the tree line one last time in the faint pre-light, more out of habit than expectation. The wild is quiet now, as though the creatures beyond the camp's edge have also paused for this in-between hour. A faint shuffling begins in the camp, a slow, muffled stirring beneath hides. One of the older women, not on the night watch, but light of sleep, pushes herself up to sitting. She says nothing, only pulls her own cloak tighter and moves toward the fire. The watchers exchange a small nod with her, a simple gesture of the shift change. There is no formal handing over, it is more like the passing of a silent thread between them. This is the moment in which the watcher's thoughts can loosen. The deep responsibility of the night, the listening for sounds that don't belong, the tending of the fragile heat, all of that can now recede. They can think of rest, of curling into their hides for a short, dream-heavy sleep before the true work of the day begins. The camp, however, wakes differently. Dawn does not arrive in a rush here. It seeps in like water into cloth, finding every gap and hollow. A child turns in its sleep, pulling the fur closer to its chin. Somewhere, the muffled cough of an elder punctuates the quiet. A soft whisper of bare feet on the packed earth comes as one woman steps toward the edge of the clearing, her eyes adjusting to the widening light. The sky above is changing by degrees. The first sign is a thinning in the darkness toward the east, where the line of trees meets the horizon. At first, it is nothing more than a suggestion, a faint lifting of the shadow's weight. Then, as minutes pass, the deep blue at the sky's edge softens, letting in the palest of greys. It is not yet enough to see the full shapes of faces, but the fire's glow now competes with this growing light. The elder who joined the fire takes up a small woven basket from beside her sleeping place. Without speaking, she moves to the food cache and retrieves a handful of dried roots, their surfaces faintly ridged from drying in the past days. She kneels by the fire, breaking them into smaller pieces. The watchers watch her hands, slow, certain as she drops the pieces into a pot, adding a skin of water to begin the day's first warming drink. The faint scent of earth rises as the roots meet the heat around the fire. Movement increases, but still in that muted, unhurried way. Another woman rises, wrapping her hair into a loose knot at the base of her neck. She squats to add a piece of split wood to the growing flames. The watcher's work is nearly finished. The fire is no longer just embers, but a small, steady blaze. Ready to meet the day, the soundscape shifts in tiny increments. From somewhere high above, the first bird call of the morning threads through the air. Not a chorus yet, but a single voice testing the edge of day. The women glance upward at the sound, not out of surprise, but because it is as much a marker of time as the movement of the stars was hours ago. Another bird answers, farther away, and then another. Soon, a slow spreading murmur of wings and voices joins them. The night watchers stand now. One of them takes a long drink from the shared skin of water, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. The other rolls her shoulders again, breathing out slowly. They make no announcement, but they step back from the fire, giving space to those who are now gathering there to begin the morning's work. The elder murmurs something to them, a soft, almost musical word of thanks, before they retreat toward their sleeping hides. The ground is cold underfoot as they cross to their resting place. The warmth of the fire lingers faintly in their cloaks, but it will fade quickly once they lie down. They do not mind the comfort of rest. After the long, slow hours of the watch is its own kind of heat. One lies down at once, curling onto her side. The other takes a moment longer, pulling her hide neatly over herself before settling. Within minutes, their breathing evens into the rhythm of sleep. Meanwhile, at the fire, the day's first voices begin to thread into the air. Low, murmured exchanges about the weather, the plans for gathering, the state of the traps set the evening before. The women speak softly, partly to let the sleepers rest, partly because the stillness of dawn invites quiet. The pot over the fire begins to send up faint curls of steam. The scent of the warming roots grows richer, carrying a grounding, earthy sweetness. A few of the younger women stir from their places, rubbing at their eyes, hair tousled from sleep. They are slower to move, stretching and blinking in the pale light that is beginning to touch the clearing. The horizon has taken on a faint blush now, the grey light giving way to the thinnest wash of pink and gold. The trees on the eastern edge are no longer dark silhouettes, but etched in finer detail, branches visible, leaves holding the dew in tiny beads that catch the light. The bird calls have grown into a layered sound, weaving through the still cool air. This fragile edge of dawn, neither night nor day, will only last a short while. Soon the sun will clear the trees, and the camp will be awash in the work of the morning, rekindling tools, gathering, mending, preparing food. But in this moment, everything remains soft. The movements, the voices, even the smoke rising from the fire all seem to drift rather than hurry. The night watchers sleep now, their task completed, while the day's first keepers of the fire take their place. This quiet transfer, repeated for countless generations, marks the true heartbeat of the camp, not in the loud work of the day, but in this seamless passing from one set of hands to another, in the space where the night sighs out and the day draws its first breath. The sun does not so much rise all at once as it leans slowly into the day, spilling over the tops of the eastern trees in long slanted beams. Those first streaks of light catch on the pale mist that still clings to the clearing, turning it into a soft gold haze. Each drop of dew along the grass trembles and gleams, like a tiny bead of amber before slipping into invisibility as the warmth takes hold. The camp is now fully stirring. The elder by the fire lifts the small pot from its tripod of stones, setting it to one side to cool slightly. She pours the first measure of the root drink into a carved wooden cup and passes it to the woman nearest her. It is warm in the hands, rich in its earthy aroma, and the taste bitter at first, then deepening into something quietly sweet, is a familiar, anchoring comfort. Cups are shared around in turn, each woman taking slow sips before passing them along. The night watchers still sleep under their hides, though their forms are visible now in the sunlight that creeps across the camp floor. Their rest will be short. They will join in the day's work later, but for now they are left undisturbed. In their place, other women rise fully, shaking out their cloaks, pulling back their hair, and taking up the first tools of the day. The fire has been strengthened, a fresh log settling into its place with a faint sigh as it catches around it. Stones, warmed by the early heat, are shifted slightly to dry, damp leather, to soften sinew for cord making, to thaw frozen pieces of meat from the previous night's hunt. These small adjustments mark the slow change in pace, no longer the drifting motions of the fragile dawn, but not yet the full rhythm of the day. It is a building, a gathering of quiet energy. Beyond the clearing, a few women move toward the tree line. They carry shallow baskets slung from their shoulders, the woven reeds creaking softly. Their bare feet press into the still cool earth, leaving faint impressions that will fade under the day's warmth. They walk not in a hurry, but with the intention of gathering berries if they find them. Tender shoots, seeds shaken from drying grasses. Each step is accompanied by the sounds of the forest waking, the rustle of leaves as small creatures move, the occasional sharp call of a bird, the faint tapping of a woodpecker far off. Back in the camp, others tend to the morning's tool work. Flat stones are set upon hides, and the rhythmic, deliberate tapping of flint against antler begins. Sparks jump and die in the air as edges are shaped, each strike sending the tiniest fragment away to reveal a cleaner, sharper line. The sound is steady, almost like a slow heartbeat, and those who work in this way often speak very little. The concentration deep but unhurried. Near the fire, one woman sits with a length of sinew stretched between her hands. She twists it evenly, her thumbs moving with an easy certainty that comes from years of practice. A coil of finished cord rests at her feet, ready to be used later for tying bundles or repairing nets. Beside her, another woman is mending a tear. In a leather satchel, the bone needle moving in and out with patient precision. The sun climbs higher, and its warmth begins to reach deeper into the clearing. Shadows shrink back toward the bases of stones and sleeping hides. The air, still carrying a trace of the night's coolness, now holds the faint scent of warming earth and the resin of nearby pine. This scent mingles with the smoke of the fire, creating the familiar, grounding smell of the camp's morning hours. Children, who have until now been wrapped in their hides or clinging sleepily to their mothers, begin to drift toward one another. They pick up small sticks, stones, or scraps of leather, mimicking the movements they see in the adults, tapping one stone against another, pretending to weave cord, or arranging twigs in a circle as though building a fire. The women glance up from their work now and then, offering a quiet correction or a small word of encouragement. These moments, though not formal teaching, are the way skills pass from one generation to the next, absorbed in the same steady rhythm as the day itself. By mid-morning, the baskets carried to the tree line begin to return. One is filled with handfuls of berries, their deep color staining the fingers of the woman who carries them. Another holds a modest gathering of seeds and green shoots. These are brought first to the fire, where the elder sorts them into piles, some to be eaten today, some to be dried for later. Nothing is wasted. Even the smallest fragment of green is turned to use. The pace now is fully in motion. The sun lies heavy on the stones, and the coolness of early morning has given way to a gentle warmth that invites movement. Women rise and shift tasks. Easily, the one who is mending now joins in grinding seeds on the flat stone, while the cord maker goes to check the drying rack where strips of meat hang, protected by a thin weave of branches against birds and insects. The day will grow busier still, but for now, there is a balance between work and quiet. The camp hums with the soft sounds of stone on stone, of woven reeds creaking under the weight of the morning's gathering, of low conversation carried in the warm air. Above, the sky is a pale, unbroken blue, the sun still low enough to cast long, gentle beams between the trunks of the surrounding trees. It is the hour when the warmth has settled, but has not yet turned to heat, when work feels natural and unforced, when every movement, whether striking flint, weaving cord, or sorting berries, seems to align with the unhurried turning of the day. By the time the sun climbs high enough to press directly onto the clearing, the air has taken on a different weight. The cool freshness of dawn has slipped entirely away, replaced by a steady, embracing warmth that settles over stones, hides, and bare skin. The shadows, once long and full of soft edges, now draw tight and compact beneath the low shapes of baskets, tools, and the uneven stones of the fire ring. The women shift their work to suit this deepening heat. Those who had been gathering now return for good, baskets heavier than before. One woman tips hers onto a woven mat, berries spilling in a loose cascade of deep reds and purples. Another lays out pale green shoots, their tender ends glistening slightly in the sunlight. These will be eaten quickly before the heat wilts them, while the berries will be sorted, the ripest set aside to be eaten now, the rest spread in a single layer on a broad, flat hide to dry slowly in the sun. A few women work at the grinding stones, their hands steady and deliberate. Seeds gathered over the past days are poured in small piles onto the hollowed surface of smooth rocks. The rounded handstones press and circle over them in slow arcs, cracking the husks, turning each grain into fine meal. The soft sound of this, a faint, gritty whisper, threads through the air in a rhythm so familiar it almost disappears into the background. Every so often, a breeze carries the faint, nutty scent of crushed grain across the camp, near the fire. The elder sits with her back straight, watching a small pot suspended over the coals. Inside, a mixture of roots, leaves, and dried meat simmers, gently releasing a thin, savory steam. She stirs with a carved stick, the movement slow enough to match the unhurried pace of the day. The cooking is not hurried. It never is, for the work of turning gathered plants and preserved meat into a shared meal is as much about timing as it is about ingredients. A few paces away, two women tend to the drying rack. Strips of meat hang in neat lines, the outer edges darkened by the slow process of curing. They check each piece, feeling for firmness, turning them to catch the sun evenly. Where a strip has begun to curl at the edges, it is smoothed back into place. Every so often, they glance at the branches overhead, watching for the flutter of wings, a reminder that even the smallest bird will try its luck if given the chance. In the far corner of the clearing, others work on shelter maintenance. The hides, stretched over wooden frames, are tightened where they have loosened in the night's damp air. Pegs are pressed deeper into the soil, cords are retied, and the edges of the coverings are adjusted so that no rain, when it comes, will seep through. This is work done with quiet efficiency, not exciting, but vital. A loose corner left untended can mean a cold, wet night, and no one in the camp ignores such small necessities. Children drift between tasks, drawn to whatever looks most interesting in the moment. They kneel beside the grinding stones to watch. The seeds break down, poke at the drying berries with cautious fingers, or carry small pebbles and sticks to the shelter area to mimic the repairs they see. Their chatter is soft, a background hum against the more deliberate sounds of the women's work. Sometimes they are shooed away gently. Other times they are allowed to help in some small way, their eager faces bright in the sunlight. The sky above is a pale, open blue now, the kind of clear stretch that offers no hint of clouds. The warmth presses evenly, not yet heavy enough to slow the movements of the camp, but enough that the fire is tended less often, kept to a lower, steadier burn. The air smells of drying berries, faint wood smoke, and the sharper green scent of crushed shoots by this hour. The rhythm of the camp is at its fullest, all hands occupied, no task left undone. The women move easily from one duty to another, swapping a grinding stone for a knife, a basket for a bundle of drying cord. There is no sense of rush. The day is long, and the work is paced to match it. But there is an unspoken understanding that this part of the morning, when the light is bright but not yet glaring, when the heat is full but not stifling, is the best time to push forward with the heavier tasks. Soon the sun will pass overhead, and the camp will ease into the slower, shaded hours of midday. For now, though the work continues in its gentle, steady rhythm, seeds ground to meal, meat checked and turned, shelters tightened, and food prepared. The cycle is unbroken, just as it has been for seasons upon seasons, and so the day leans forward once again, each movement carrying the quiet, enduring knowledge that tomorrow will bring the same warmth, the same work, the same patient turning of life beneath the open sky.